Welcome to Tuscan Talks, Senior Living Today. Senior living communities have come a long way from the days they were referred to as old folks' homes. Senior living has become hospitality on steroids, and seniors are living it up, leading enriching and fulfilling lives. Join me in a rewarding conversation with experts, professionals, practitioners, and seniors, explaining what senior living is all about. Our guest today is from One Day University. It's Kevin Brennan. I had the opportunity to meet Kevin a number of years ago. I'll tell you the circumstances in a second. And what we're going to talk about is what One Day University is and how it really functions in the senior living field. So we'll get to that in just a second. Before I let him introduce himself and give you his background, just know that I'd had the opportunity to meet Kevin a couple years ago. We brought One Day University into Tuscan Gardens, our communities here in Florida, primarily just because I was just blown away by the product itself and the value that it would have to our residents. And since then, they've just done super in lots of different fields. We're just really bringing you that subject area today. So in any event, Kevin, welcome. Glad to see you. Why don't we start off, first of all, by just giving everybody just an understanding of what your background is and how you got involved with One Day University, and then we can transition into what One Day University is.
Sure. So interesting story. I guess my background is primarily in marketing. So I grew up coming up through ad agencies, and mostly in New York City and Atlanta. I started my own design and marketing firm in around 2003 or so. And one of my clients was a man named Steven Stragus at a company called The Learning Annex, which is, if you're not familiar, it was a sort of another lifelong learning platform, live classes. You could learn anything from how to be a bartender to how to make $1 million in real estate, et cetera. So I worked with him at the Learning Annex for a long time. He left there and subsequently founded One Day University. And I stayed on as a contractor and eventually became one of the partners at One Day University. So that was he's been a good friend and a good business partner for many years.
And so when was that? When did you first start with One Day University?
I first started in 2013. So One Day University was founded in 2006, 2007. And there was a period of 5 years where there was some transition in ownership. And at the end of 2012, there's an opportunity for me to come on as a partner with Steven and sort of back to the original ownership. So I jumped at that opportunity and have been there ever since.
That's fantastic. By the way, I'm very familiar. I went to law school in New York. Okay. So I was very familiar with Learning Annex.
Oh, sure.
Their catalogs were, on every other corner.
Exactly, yeah.
So when were you at Learning Annex?
So I was actually, at that time I had my own firm. So I was a contractor. So I was I was actually designing all of those catalogs and a lot of the other marketing pieces involved with what they were doing in those days. So,
well, it certainly makes an awful lot of sense because I used to love what Learning Annex did. And now I understand the transition because One Day University in a different context does something relatively similar. So talk about it. So talk about One Day University and what the value proposition is and so forth.
Sure. So essentially, One Day University is a lifelong learning platform. We feature professors from all over the country, over 250 professors now on our roster from pretty much every school you can imagine, Harvard, Brown, Yale, Princeton, et cetera, but also some schools you may not have heard of, Lynn University, Claremont McKenna, which is somewhat popular, and Chapman University. So that we try to find really the most popular, best as in what we're looking for, professors on campus. And what we're looking for is somebody who's clearly knows their material inside and out, but also has a real ability to entertain while they're teaching. So I think that's one of our most important criteria for a professor. Can you keep somebody riveted and engaged for 45 minutes to an hour, and at the end of the hour, the person says, "Wow, is this already over? I wish we could go on for forever." So what we do essentially is we work with these professors to develop talks based on their most popular courses. So they teach a semester-long course. We try to distill that down into about an hour. It could be on history, psychology, political science, anything in the arts, art, music, film. Broadway's been really popular for us lately. And like I said, they're just bite-sized opportunities to learn in a really fun and engaging way. Historically, we were a live event company. So we ran live events in 60 different cities across the country, about 250 events a year up until March 13th of 2020. Sorry about that. We essentially, an event would look like this is our core event was 3 to 4 professors, each professor talking about a different topic, and people would come not to get a degree or to get ahead or to advance their careers in any way. It was really just because they love learning. They thought it was fascinating and a great opportunity, a good way to spend the day with a professor and a group of like-minded people who felt the same way as they did. Of course, in March of 2020, we transitioned almost entirely to a virtual company, along with every other live event company. And we're very fortunate that we had these remarkable professors who could translate the energy and the passion and the joy of teaching from being live on stage to in front of the camera. And so now we live stream a different talk every day with a different professor. So Monday, you might learn about history, Tuesday, psychology, Wednesday, you might actually learn about something completely different, like the history of pizza, for example, or all different kinds of cheeses. We try to really mix it up and keep the content fresh.
So just to make sure that I encapsulate what you're saying for both the viewers as well as listeners, because we're both a video podcast as well as audio podcast. So the current format that you have, because I remember back in the day when I would pick up a newspaper and you had those full page ads, and I was trying to figure out how you were able to make money on these 1 hour lectures. And but at this point in time, you are a digital delivery. So it's an online delivery of a video lecture of some type with one of these professors. The average is approximately an hour, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
And it's constant content.
Exactly. Yep. There is one thing that I just wanted to add is that every weekday we do a live stream. So it's a 45-minute talk with the professor and then a 15-minute Q&A. So the viewers are able to ask their questions and have them answered in real time. It's actually a text-based questions and answer system. So throughout the talk, you can type in your question, and then the professor at the end of the lecture will answer questions for essentially as long as the time allows. So that's been a really interesting development because people, even in the live events too, that often was a really one of the better parts of the talk because. Sure. It brought out things that weren't in the talk and clarified things. And it's just a really, really interesting way to end the session.
And that's something, by the way, that has to be new from the time that we brought it on, because I think this is the first time I'm actually hearing about the live talks. I'll have to go back to my communities and make sure that they take advantage of that.
Sure.
Go back to the actual inventory. So besides the live talks every day, live streaming, what kind of inventory of courses do you have? 1 hour talks do you actually have available for your customers?
Yep. So currently there are about 600 talks in the library, somewhere between 550 and 600. And because we're doing the live streams every day, we're adding at least 4 talks a week. So often what we'll do is one day a week, we'll do what we call an encore presentation. So something from 6-8 months ago, we'll repeat that, but the professor will still come on for the live Q&A, but it'll be a pre-recorded talk.
Got it.
But we're generating at least 3 to 4 new pieces of content per week. So that's 150 new talks a year, 200 talks a year. So we should continue to growing that pretty quickly over the next over the foreseeable future. I don't see us changing our format, to be honest. We've started to get back into live events. But this has been so popular that I think
sure. It's almost like, why would you want to, right?
Right. right.
So go before we actually transition into senior living and how it's relevant to senior living communities. Just talk about what your basic customer base actually is at this point.
So to be honest, we have about 30,000 people who subscribe to the channel. Well, we'll call it the channel, but they're our members. And the demographics have been pretty consistent from our live event days until now. I would say the average user is 60 plus. They are very well educated. In our latest survey, we had about 60% with graduate degrees. They love going to the symphony. They love going to Broadway shows. They read. They're avid readers of all sorts of things. Print media. They still read the print edition of the newspaper often. They read magazines.
Sure.
But they're people who just wake up every day and say, I wonder if I can do something interesting and new and unique today.
What could I learn today?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Got it. Fantastic. In addition to that, obviously, there came a time, because I remember those conversations we had a couple years ago, that you began, and it was right after you were in the process of transitioning from live to online, to transitioning into providing services in senior living communities. So how has that, I know that we brought you on at Tuscan Gardens, but how has that whole segment of senior living communities worked out for you?
It's going very well. I mean, we're growing it pretty quickly. And it's an interesting story because we never really intended to be in senior living. In fact, I don't think we ever even identified it as a viable market. But we had a person who came to our live events often in New York City, was the engagement director, lifestyle director at a community in Connecticut, and said, you know what, I think my residents would really love this. Have you guys ever thought about live streaming your live events? And we said, well, nope, but that's a great idea. So we did it, and it went over really well. And of course, we're fortunate that she thought of that idea. And so it's been going really well. We have, I want to say, don't quote me on this, but I want to say somewhere around 500 communities are using One Day.
Oh, wow.
Pretty regular now. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So let me just simply say then that for any of our viewers and listeners, clearly, if you're shopping for a senior living community, one of the questions you're going to want to ask them is, do they have One Day University? And I can say that from a personal standpoint because I was certainly the driver to make sure that we had One Day University in all of ours because of the type of product it had. What was now that you're 500 communities deep into the segment, what has been your learning with respect to senior living, with respect to the responsiveness to One Day University, the responsiveness to the type of content, the format you produce, and so forth?
Yeah, one of the things that I think has been a recurring theme is that a lot of content that's created for the senior living community is really, I don't know how to, I'm trying to be sensitive here, but it's not super engaging. It's basic. It's how many times can you go and do bingo, for example? That's a bad analogy, but that's kind of what it is. So we never created this content specifically for senior living. We created it for people who love to learn. And there are maybe perhaps millions of people in senior living communities that fit that bill. So the content is very high quality and it's very engaging and it's very intellectually stimulating. And this is what residents in senior living community are craving. And that's one thing that we've learned. We offer a really high quality I'm not sure if I should say this, but it's not dumbed down at all. Okay?
That's right. I know you're trying to be politically correct here,
right?
But that's what we're doing at Senior Living Today. It's kind of like not about your old concepts. It's not about these antiquated concepts of nursing homes and old age homes and all that kind of thing. Today's senior. They want to be intellectually stimulated. They want to be mentally engaged. And of course, your comment is that That's exactly what your content is.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's why when it's so exciting to talk to people like you who really recognize that and who are really working to provide that outlet for their residents. So it's that's the one thing I've learned. When people, it seems very refreshing to people when we talk to them we give them a trial account or something, and they experience the content for themselves, and they say, "Wow, our residents would absolutely eat this up," and that's been great to hear for sure.
And I'm sure that there are any number of people on the R&D side of your business that are familiar with some of these studies. But the National Institute of Aging, the University of Texas, University of South Carolina, of Southern California, USC, all of them have enormous numbers of studies and empirical studies with seniors in senior living, but also just seniors, even if they're aging in place at home. And what this type of exposure to content courses, to rich intellectual stimulation, what that does to their brain development. And more specifically than that, what it does in terms of impairing or impeding the deterioration of their mental capabilities, because they stay actively involved. They stay actively intellectually engaged. And so the natural forces of aging that obviously take an impact on synapses and brain functioning and so forth certainly get retarded along the way, so that they can have just much more benefit over a longer period of time in being able to do that. And I'm sure your R&D people are clear, but those studies are out there in any number of areas that actually study aging.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one other thing is that, not just having the passive activity of watching the content, it's the ability to watch the content together and have discussions about it and continue the conversation. So I think that has also been another thing that we've learned, is that having a discussion group, or ideally, when depending on how the COVID situation is, but ideally if people can watch together in a room and then have an hour discussion amongst themselves afterwards,
Yep.
That's when things really start getting getting interesting, I think.
Yeah, and I think by the way, you identified clearly what our format is, and it's ebbed and flowed a little bit because of COVID, but the basic format that we instituted at Tuscan Gardens has the two components to it. Everybody has their own individual access to One Day University, so if they want to just watch it in their suites, they can. On the other hand, where the real benefit lies is we show it in the media room. And then it's followed by, discussion and refreshments, so that whatever it is that they see for an hour, they then get to discuss it afterwards. And that's the social component that you're talking about. Exactly.
And that to me, that's the best way. I mean, that's the ideal situation where, there are times, of course, when people are they can't sleep at
Right.
2 a.m. and they want to watch on their own, which is great. But the best is by far to be able to watch it together and have that social component. I agree.
Well, rest assured, by the way, I ended up bringing the gym to our house on a personal level now, not Tuscan Gardens, but on a personal level with COVID. And I decided that I probably was not going to go work out at a gym anymore.
Right.
So we bought some equipment and put it in the second garage. And we have the monitor up there. And needless to say, when I'm on the elliptical, you can only imagine what I'm watching.
Good.
I'm watching any number of your professors' lectures.
That's great.
Yeah, fantastic. So for the viewers and the listeners here, so is it just onedayuniversity.com? Is that it?
It's onedayu.com. So one day the letter u.com.
Okay, and they can get it on all devices.
So and currently it's web based, so you can get it on your computer or on your tablet or on your iPhone browser. And we're in the process of building out the Roku, iOS, and Apple TV apps. So those are hopefully within the next 4 to 5 months or so. Roku should be in the next 2 to 3 months.
Oh, fantastic.
And then the Apple devices to follow.
Fantastic. Well, I don't know for purposes of this particular podcast. I think that the takeaways are really the component of this that we're talking about, which is that, when you have a resource like a one-day university that has the opportunity to provide intellectual content of every variety, and I keep calling it intellectual content, but we both know that in the courses you've got pure entertainment, you have pure musical, which you could just sit back and just enjoy. You have historical, you have adventure, you have the broad array of subjects that would absolutely keep you captivated. But when you think about it from the standpoint of just simply keeping your mind agile and just engaged and, hey, what am I going to learn today? What am I going to take a look at today? It's, all of those types of things certainly becomes an important component for any of our viewers or listeners who are really thinking about getting involved in a senior living community of some type, wherever they might be in the entire United States. And also, of course, the pure benefit of just subscribing as individual members also, so that they can just take advantage of of what you present at One Day University. Any other takeaways that you might want to just leave us with at this point, Kevin?
No, honestly, I think we pretty much covered it all. The only other, from a business perspective, it is, I feel like it's, and maybe you can talk about this too, Larry, but I feel like it's a pretty affordable way. There are no long-term contracts. You're not locked in forever. And so I feel like it's a pretty affordable way to get a lot of your residents involved in this content. And like we said, most importantly, perhaps, is it really does foster interesting conversation between residents and staff. And to be honest, if the staff feels that they want to, watch some of the talks and it will help them in their life in any way, that's perfectly acceptable too. So I think there are a lot of applications and ways for people to learn. So
fantastic. That's great. Well, Kevin, thank you for being a guest. I know that our viewers and our listeners have had an opportunity to potentially be exposed to something they may not have even been aware of, and certainly not aware of the connection between what One Day University provides and what would be appropriate for a senior living community to be providing, especially if they don't have it right now. So I appreciate you on the show. Thank you so much for being here. And I'll look forward to just simply hearing more about your growth, and particularly in our sector.
Excellent. Thank you, Larry. I really appreciate you having me.
Okay. You're certainly welcome. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Tuscan Talks, Senior Living Today. For more information about us, our guests, our communities, and for a full library of our episodes and resource materials, visit TuscanTalks.com. See you next time.